afternoon, about an hour after school had closed, the children were playing on the street next to the school, and one of the fathers was out there playing with the children when a car pulled up, and the father grabbed his daughter in front of him, and they shot him and killed him. And they shot him about 4 or 5 inches above her head. The other children in the street witnessed that. That came into my school the next day like a thunderbolt. It just rolled through my school. It's a common occurrence in America, but it's not common until you have gone through it. This can happen anywhere in America, in any school in America.
Our city is cracked. There was nowhere to go but down, lower and lower. I am torn, just as my city is cracked.
It's all behind me now, and I'm back to normal. But sometimes, in my dreams, I still hear the crying of my little brother and the screams of our best friend whose mother died. Then my alarm goes off. Was it just a dream, or not, or not, or not?
When a disaster comes, the persons that are on the margin are the most impacted. Living in poverty, living on the verge of homelessness are disasters that many people and many children have to deal with every day. It's an ongoing factor of life, and it's increasingly so. For some children, being in school and staying in that same school despite moving all around and moving across boundaries and so forth provides the only stability in their life. And many of the youngsters, school is important. Getting a good grade is important, and it's important that they don't lose that value because they have very few other things they can hang on to.
I often say that to my teachers, the one thing you've got to remember is you don't know what a child goes through to get here. Very hard on children.
Any principal's worst nightmare would be contemplating, what would I do if a disaster struck my particular school and any number of my students were injured or killed? What would I do to take care of them? How would I take care of their families? How would I take care of the needs of my teachers, my counselors, and my whole administrative staff?
The principal has to give leadership, and if the principal isn't committed to the idea that children need to be taught how to deal with disaster, then the school's going to fail in that program.
The schools are very important in the recovery of children because in some ways they're equal to the home as an environment where the child is spending many hours, in which teachers and principals and the staff of the school have a real importance in the child's mind, and as a place in which the structured environment of their day can provide a real recovery environment for them after disaster or a violent event.
It's not uncommon for teachers to wonder, what will a clinician do when they arrive at the school? And that depends on, of course, various circumstances. However, clinicians or mental health teams work in the classroom, entire classrooms at a time. They may work with a selected group of high-risk children, or they may work with an individual child, depending on that child's needs. A mental health team may take on several roles. One is that of providing information about normal and prolonged stress reactions for the school staff, for the parents, the children themselves. We can also provide direct services to the school staff in the way of debriefing, structured or unstructured.
One assumes automatically that teachers know everything. And a teacher walks in a classroom, everybody expects that teacher to teach everything. That's not the case. Teachers need training. There's no preparation by the universities for this kind of teaching.
This program where we've brought mental health professionals into the classroom, into schools to work with teachers, has expanded our knowledge and our understanding of what happens to kids when a disaster strikes, and gives us some real tools that we can work with in the classroom to make a difference.
One of the most common reactions we see in children after a disaster is anxiety and fear. And that anxiety and fear may play itself out in terms of the children being afraid of being separated from the parents, so they may not want to go to school, for example. Children are also very sensitive to reminders of the disasters. Children kind of slip back in their developmental level to an earlier stage of behaviors. It's not at all uncommon for children to develop stomach aches and headaches and skin rashes and to have more colds and allergies and so on. And often it's the school nurse who will pick up on this. Many times children are having bad dreams at night. They may be nightmares about the disaster, or they may be nightmares about other scary things, and it's fear of going to sleep that's keeping them from going to bed. For the teacher who's dealing with a child or children in the classroom who haven't been sleeping for a few days or a few weeks or in some cases a few months, you can imagine how that level of fatigue is interfering with the children's ability to concentrate and to learn in the classroom.
When assessing children, we take into account not only their exposure to the traumatic event, which is critical, but we also look to take in the psychosocial history of the child. That is, what previous stressors or significant losses they've had in their life.
A few years ago, at one of the schools in the city of Stockton, an individual walked onto the playground and used an automatic weapon, opened fire, and injured over 20 children and killed 5 children. Most of the children that were injured and all of the children that were killed were Southeast Asian. The importance of understanding the cultural background from which these children and families came from was enormously important. In some cultures, children are taught that if you feel pain or trauma, you should express yourself. In other cultures, you're taught not to express anger, not to express anguish, not to express pain, and that in fact you're a better person if you're able to hold it all inside and not verbalize it.
I feel good or feel bad.
You feel good or bad?
Yeah.
Okay.
I feel bad.
Does it hurt real bad?
I feel bad.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Were you afraid?
I feel bad. Yeah. Pay. Yeah.
How do you engage these children? Many of them were still struggling with English, had not really been able to express themselves in the English language very well. So it really requires people who are able to communicate effectively with the children.
People often ask, how long does recovery take? How long does this go on? And we've found that in most children and adults, the anxiety reactions, the fear and anxiety and nervousness and so on, generally begin to subside after about 6 weeks to 3 months, unless there are a lot of reminders. What takes much longer is the grief that's involved, the sadness that people feel, because recovery from disaster is about loss. And for children, it's the loss of that confident belief that the world is a safe and secure place. And it takes time to get over those losses. There are certain times during the first year of recovery when people may experience a reawakening of some of their reactions, their anxiety reactions and their feelings of grief. And those times include around the 6-month anniversary. They may occur around holiday times, and they certainly occur around the time of the 1-year anniversary. What's also important is that the anniversary provides people with a natural opportunity to look back at not only what happened a year ago today and what the losses were, but to look back on how far we've come over this past year. And it's a time when people can truly begin to experience themselves no longer as victims, but as survivors.
The topic we worked on toward the end of the first year was a very simple task that was referred to as a gains and loss collage. And it gave a structured approach for survivors and siblings to look at their lives at that moment, somewhere around 8 months after the bus crash, and to see what had changed for them. They were surprised to find out that what they put down on their gain side of the collage was not always good. Some of the things they put down on the loss side was not always bad.
Shortly after the Loma Prieta earthquake, what we decided in Alameda County was that perhaps the best intervention in the schools was to train teachers. First of all, we know that teachers are not mental health professionals, but they certainly could benefit from a training by a mental health professional.
It's important also when we start to talk about dealing with children in a disaster that we talk about ourselves first. And particularly, as happened for the October 17th earthquake, when you had a few days before you went back to be with the children, that there is a time for you as the adults to really deal with your own feelings about helplessness and fear and anger, so that when you come back to be with the children, you can do so in a way that is supportive to them.
As mental health professionals, we know that the diffusing of children after the disaster is of a major importance. I mean, to allow children to express themselves with regards to the trauma of the disaster just experienced. During the training, we train teachers to understand the importance of the diffusing, first of all, and giving them the tools to do so.
Can someone read this word? Disaster. What's a disaster? What's a disaster? When things are destroyed or things are messed up, yeah.
In using the method of talking with students in a group, you're limited just because of the size of a group. You're going to get some who are going to take over the conversations. You can have some who are going to listen. Even though one child might be very quiet and shy, there are other children who take advantage of the connection available to them, and they will talk about it, and maybe this would be as a role model for shyer children.
When you have these feelings and you are scared or sad, who do you talk to? Who can you talk to? Yourself? Who else can you talk to? Who? Your parents? Who else can you talk to? Your mom? Yeah? Who else can you talk to?
I try to be as warm with the kids as possible so that if there really isn't anyone they can turn to, at least they can find me after school to talk about these things, and I can kind of begin to direct them a certain way and encourage the parents, too, to give them the kind of direction they need.
When bad things happen to me, I feel scared, I feel real sad, I get worried, I get terrified, I get nervous. I sometimes feel helpless, and sometimes I feel shaken, too. But one thing I oftentimes feel is I get mad. How many of you get mad when bad things happen to you? Mad. What do you do when you're mad? What do you do when you're mad? You what?
I get nervous.
You get nervous when you're mad? Yeah?
I lose my temper.
You lose your temper?
More or less, I validate that what they went through was real and that their reaction to it is okay. And if one person has a benign reaction and one has a more serious reaction, that's okay too, because people are in different stations.
When you feel sad and scared and worried, that's all normal. But when it stays with you too long and you're finding you can't eat, you can't sleep, you can't play, you don't laugh as much anymore over a long period of time, that's when you should talk to the people that you named, like your grandmother or your mother or your father or your friends or even to yourself.
We try to impart a sense of empowerment to the children. They don't have a lot of power in this world to begin with, but whatever we can leave them with, knowing that they have some control over their lives, that they're not at the mercy of everybody or anything that happens to them, that they have the mental ability and the emotional stamina to work through what life deals out to them. That is an important thing to leave them with.
And even though it was scary and you were worried, you all knew what to do. You all got under the sills. You all knew to get under a table. You all knew how to take care of yourself, and that's really good. So whenever there's an emergency, you might remember your last emergency and say, "Woo, I took care of myself last time. I can do it again."
What did you think was happening?
It was burning all down, melting.
And what did you think about that, or how did you feel about that?
I feel very scared.
Very scared. And this is the terrific benefit of art with children is that they can tell us something about what's going on inside of them that is beyond what they're able to articulate. Did you see these things happening?
Only on TV.
On TV, but so you know that they happened because you saw them on TV. And how does that make you feel?
Scared.
Scared, yeah. But it's very important to realize that we're anchoring things in the child at the same time that we're encouraging them to draw. If the child has drawn a picture of how frightened they were, how scared they were, or the kind of catastrophe that they're afraid that they could be involved in, that if we just leave them with that, that really is what we have left them with, and that is what the child walks away with, having been anchored in them. So it's very important to go on to the next drawing and to say, how are you different now? How are you wiser because of this? How are you stronger because of this? Or how are you more prepared should you ever be in a disaster again? And where is your hero self? Where is your strongest self? And to get that drawing out.
All of us have been through a tremendous experience together. Everybody in this room has been through an incredible experience together, and we're all survivors of that experience. And that makes us a little bit different than people who haven't been through, and it makes us a little bit different than the way we were before the earthquake. So what I'd like for you to do now for your last drawing is to draw a picture of yourself prepared and ready.
We got our food, our can, and water. And here's our blankets and pillows. And here's our tent.
So you've got your supplies, you're really ready. And if the power goes out this time, you're going to have a flashlight, huh?
Yeah.
One of the strongest examples in which we've been able to identify at-risk children, though, has been when the children draw themselves before the earthquake and after the earthquake. And many of the children, I'm glad to say most of the children, will draw themselves before the earthquake as maybe simple-minded, or very small, or very sweet, or very pleasant. And then when we ask them to draw themselves after the earthquake, they draw themselves with muscles, they draw themselves enlightened, that their brains are bigger. Some of them are able to hold the world over their heads. But some of them will draw themselves weaker, falling apart, with maybe just a head and a skirt and a blouse, and there are no arms or legs, and there's no face. So it's a very graphic example that this is an at-risk child that needs to have more attention. And it also is a wonderful map for the teacher or the counselor or the therapist, because this child knows that there is this difference. This child knows that they're in trouble.
No one wants to believe that disasters will happen and that our children will be exposed to seeing and hearing and feeling such terrifying things. But disasters do happen. What I think is important is that we as adults realize that we're not helpless in the recovery period, that we can help children in their recovery, that by school personnel, mental health personnel, and parents working together, we can give children the opportunity to talk about their feelings and to move forward through the healing.